Okay, let's see. Time to start. Oh, yes. There I am. Hey, guys. How are you doing today?
Good, you, sir?
I'm all right, Arturo. How was your weekend?
Pretty good.
What'd you do?
Just worked.
Oh, yeah, me too. Um, Mostly worked and a little bit of just sort of recuperating, I guess. But didn't get nearly as much done as I wanted to do. In fact, that's probably where I should start is with a general apology to everybody today. I'm pretty sure that I led you to believe that I was going to be sending you an announcement over the weekend that would sort of give an overall picture of where we were and where we were going in here. And I kept intending to do that as soon as I'd completed what I was working on with the assignment that I was working on for you guys. But that delayed me a great deal. And the more I thought about it, the longer it took to get something together for something that at first I thought was just going to be a something we'd pass through on the way to a larger assignment at the end of the semester. But as this grew, I realized that I was well, first off, that I was in danger of arriving this morning without having contacted you guys over the weekend, and that's indeed what happened. I apologize about that. Um, it was about 12:30 last night that I finally realized what I needed to do to make things work was to simply take the big assignment that I had sitting waiting for us to do at the end of the semester and just take it and take it out and get rid of it so that we could do justice to the assignment that was supposed to be um, an assignment on the way, as it were. This reminds me of where we're going to be in class today, I think, in terms of the conceptual elements of things. So try not to distract myself. So, long story short, I didn't get back to you guys because I was trying to get together the stuff that I thought I'd get that I would present to you over the weekend in a more compelling form, either by means of a little video or something. But now that I got you here, um, and before we get started on anything else, maybe I could take a few minutes to show you the changes that I made so that everybody's aware of where we're headed. And if there's any questions that I can answer, because this is something that I was just working out last night finally, myself in my own mind. If there's any questions I can answer going forward right now about um, aspects of what I'm asking you to do, I'd like to try and do that. And if not, you'll have a little time to think about it. We don't have anything that we have to get really rolling for this immediately, but maybe by the end of the class today, I could have a few moments to get you to think about the general outlines of what I'm working on for you guys and what I want you to do for us, for me. Okay, so let me take a few minutes and share with you. Let's see, I think probably the best place to start is with the revised version of the schedule that I sent you guys. I'd say I sort of reserve the right to change it where necessary, and I think this is where necessary has come in here. So let's take a look, and maybe as we sort of scan through this together, you'll see some places that I've overlooked something that maybe you want to ask me about. But mostly, I just want to point you to the changes that I've made as a result of rethinking what we're capable of doing in the time we have left, and what would be the most useful way, I think, for you guys to use your time so that you feel like you were getting something that made sense out of the course as a whole. So let's look at that. Let me share my screen if that's okay with you guys. I guess I should ask first, is there something pressing that I forget to ask this, something pressing that any of you need to know right now that would help you pay attention today? If I answer it now, well, it's because it's burning a hole in you in some way, wanting to know what's the answer to this question. Is there anything that's urgent that you guys know of that I can do anything about at the moment? Because I want to take care of the urgent stuff so we have a quiet few minutes together to look and see what I've been working on. No, nothing urgent. Okay, cool. Then let me share this. Share screen, share the schedule, and it looks sort of like this. I hope it looks like this is your, this is meant to be your copy. So where did, to take a moment just to sort of look at where we've been, right? Wow, so much has gone on in such a compressed period of time that it's really quite crazy. What are we? We're at the 26th. We've been actually through really 21 days all told. That doesn't seem like very much time to go through all the stuff we've gone through. So we started on the 5th, and by the end of the first class, I think I had you guys working on playing this game, Vixie, and it sort of set the tone for what's going on here. And I wanted to come back and revisit it towards the end of the semester anyway. But along the way, I wanted to incorporate the way that philosophy was presented in that game into our course in some other way, that to make more of it. By that I mean the fact that they give us not one viewpoint, that is the philosophical viewpoint, and ask you to evaluate and assess yourself according to that, but they start with a plurality. They start with this idea of schools of philosophy, which because it's so difficult to define what counts as a school, is something that I myself never thought about, or organizing my investigations into philosophy along those lines. I just sort of amble my way into whatever it is that seemed interesting at the time and work that way. And eventually you come to realize that, you know, you're working in ancient Greek philosophy over here, you're working in existentialism over here, and things like that. And the names can be useful in some ways, but start from the orientation. There are these different ways to do philosophy, and that each of them may have their own legitimacy, but each of them also may have their own limitations. Okay. I think we got an open mic somewhere. Unless somebody's trying to talk to me. No?
Why don't you
Okay.
take it whenever you're with me so I can help you cheat if you need to?
Is that for me? Is this I think it's who's got the open mic here? Let's see. I'm not sure. If you're trying to talk to me, I can't hear you. You need to talk louder or put something in the chat. Otherwise, I'll just go on. What I ended up coming up with, besides a little sketch of an idea of somehow having a comparing and contrasting between various schools, was this assignment that will now take the place of the other assignment that I'd been counting on us doing. That was going to be the major sort of way to finish up the semester. I think this makes more sense. I think it is a little less burden on the individuals who have to do it, that is you guys. And I think it may lend a certain coherence to what we've done that might otherwise be somewhat lacking, to be honest. So anyway, so remember, we have these different schools. And in fact, we're going to spend a little time today, if we have the time for that, while doing all the other stuff that's on our agenda, reminding you of what those possibilities are. They're not exclusive. They're not exhaustive. There are lots of different ways of categorizing the philosophies that people have encountered over time and are still producing. But this is a good enough list that I think we can get out of it the idea that there are things that philosophy, regardless of whose philosophy you're talking about or what school of philosophy you're talking about, there are things that philosophy aspires to do. First and foremost, in my mind, serve as a guide for life, either individually or collectively, but also to embrace questions about what the nature of reality is and how we can know those things, as those are essential, if nothing else, to that first prime directive of trying to serve as a guide for life. We should look at those schools and think a little bit more about them, because we've been, for the most part, in the school, as it's called, in this way of looking at things, of classical Greek philosophy, because the progenitor for a large swath of Western philosophy is Socrates and the immediate followers of Socrates, Plato and his follower Aristotle, and they have a lot to say, and they serve as sort of a guide to what others say, even some of those others who maybe don't have an historical connection with them. Like Buddhism has a lot in common with, not so much with Socrates per se, I don't think, but with a lot of the Stoic ideas, which are themselves extenuations of certain aspects of the Socratic project. There's in Taoism, I think you can see elements that are very similar, but not historically connected up to some of the Socratic ideas that you see in the schools, such as the Cynics. Not one of our schools that's been included here. So there are connections, even though the connections may not be overt and historical. There are connections just conceptually, because great minds think alike, if you will. And some of the people that haven't been part of the tradition that's spawned in Greece or influenced by it overtly, still often it's useful to think about them in terms of the context of this traditional Greek philosophical figures. So we spent a lot of time with the Greeks with an idea that once you get one thing down, that's sort of the pattern for others, the paradigm for others, you can apply it in the other cases. We haven't had a lot of time to look at the other cases yet, because we're still in the midst of making sense of how virtue works with happiness and the good life in one instance. That is the instance of the ancient Greeks. I think we're about to the point where we can say we can put a pin in that for today. If we get there today, we'll know. We'll look at a little bit of what Plato does, remind you a little bit of where we were with Aristotle, I think, and maybe even look forward a little bit to some of the other schools quickly by looking at through the lens, borrowed lens from Kierkegaard, who's both a student of the Greeks, 2,000 years after the fact, and the founder, if that makes sense, of the existentialist school. So learning the paradigm, whether or not the Greeks belong anymore as the only paradigm, that's another question. But the Greeks are a good paradigm for us to learn the other schools, even though I guess it stands to reason that if we start thinking that a certain school is a paradigm for other schools, then that will distort in some ways what we consider value in the second school that we come to look at. I don't know that can be helped. You have to understand something, it seems to me, you have to be able to relate it to something else you understand. So that which is totally foreign and new to you, if you don't put it into some kind of relationship with things that are less foreign and less new, I don't know how you can really begin to learn your way around them. And so, having to start somewhere, we started with Socrates and his buddies and his students. And that's still where we are. But I think we should understand that that's largely because they are A, historically important for a lot of the other schools, and B, a good pattern will be established by our understanding of them, so that we can look at the other schools and make some sense of them. Maybe not completely in the terms that the proponents of those schools themselves would prefer. That would probably be in the case of, say, Taoism. We'd all have to learn ancient Chinese, something that I haven't aspired to do, before we begin to understand Taoism in a Taoist way. But we can understand Taoism to an extent from our perch in Western philosophy, I think, if we have secure footing there. And that's what we've tried to do, right? But now it's time, I think, to start moving in the other direction, to opening it up, looking at the plurality of possibilities. So remembering that this game had those various schools, keep that in mind. We'll come back, circle back and look at that a little bit. We went on, we looked at the Apology. You guys, about half of you did a serious job, a good job of reading through it and making notes to help yourself and others understand it. We had you look at some videos along the way. And the videos, we haven't been able to make as much play in the classroom as I would have liked. I tried to keep them on track with where I thought we were going to go. Like, for instance, the Epicurus on happiness video that I asked you to watch at the end of the first week. I thought we were going to come back and we'd be ready for Epicurus and his thoughts on happiness as a course, as a class discussion. We were nowhere near ready for that by that point. The time that we use in class, the time allotted seems to be nothing like what the time that we really need for the conversations that we have. Even the ones that I predicted would probably eat up all the time that we could otherwise be making advance in these classes. But the ones that I don't predict at all are the ones that are most interesting, the conversations that come up because of questions or comments you guys make that lead us to connect ideas up and start talking about things that maybe are not directly related to the agenda of the day, but that's the stuff that I call philosophy. primarily, when I say philosophy breaks out, that's what I mean. It's the doing of philosophy, not the talking about philosophy. That stuff I never want to do without that. So I have to make room for that. If that means our agenda has to be retroactively shortened, which is what I've been doing all along, so be it. So the videos, luckily, I think they are largely self-contained. You can get enough out of them that even if we don't have a chance to talk about the differences between, say, the Epicurean school and the Stoic school overtly in class, when you see something that explains that Epicurus' view on happiness is thus and such, and then you see what Seneca, who's a Stoic, has to say about the passion of anger, I don't think it's too hard probably to see the connections, draw the connections yourself. It'd be nice if we had more chance to talk about those things, but until such time as everybody gives up everything else and just becomes a full-time philosophy student 7 days a week, 365 days a year, I don't know that we're ever going to have enough time. Anyway, so I've been pretty quick to push these videos back, thinking we'd catch up in class. And I've been very, very flexible with people turning in their reviews. I'd like to continue with the videos. I think you can get a lot out of this, and it's a nice way to learn. Beats listening to me, probably beats talking to me, and it beats having to do a lot of serious reading. You get an aspect of the thought of somebody who represents these various schools. That's a coincidence, right? Montaigne, very few people that I work with would even think that Montaigne would be on a list of philosophers worth thinking about. I happen to love Montaigne. Think of him primarily as really as a literary figure, but then I don't really make a sharp distinction between philosophy as literature and literary philosophy. I don't like philosophy that's not very literary. If I can avoid it, I try not to read it. That's my problem with Aristotle. But Montaigne is well known as an essayist. So French studies, everybody would know him, maybe but he's a humanist. So he represents, I think he's a very humane humanist. He represents the humanist school. So it's nice that he's there in these videos. So these videos don't give us a representative of each of our schools, but they give us representatives of the Western schools, all of them that we were looking at. So I think we'll keep up with, I think it's good to keep up with those. We've of course turned to a new perusal assignment. That's the one on the meaning of life. And I moved that back. So the due date for that, I haven't changed it on the perusal the app itself. I need to do that. I'll do that today. At which point anybody who's been working on it, if you're looking at your scores, which is not necessary, but you may be doing anyway. If you're looking at your scores, you may notice that suddenly your scores just inexplicably went up. That's because by moving the due date back, it makes what you've been doing look like it was yet more proactive than it already was. That is to say, looks like you got an even earlier start relative to the changed due date than you actually did. So then, and you get little points for when you start in this system. So you may notice that your score strangely went up a little bit. It shouldn't go down, and it shouldn't matter. Well, because at the end of the day, we're not really paying much attention to your scores as long as they indicate that you're doing something, that you're trying to read these things and annotate these things. That's all that I needed you to do. That's all I asked you to do. So it shouldn't matter much, but I'm going to push it back because it was set, I believe, for the end of this week. And I don't want us to have to do that while still trying to go forward with what we're learning and start assimilating this stuff together, which is what I hope this exercise that I've come up with for you guys to do will help us both branch out and at the same time sort of get a handle on the movement that we've been making while going a little forward so that we can make the most of the time we have left. So anyway, you'll notice that, for instance, today's the 26th, right? We at one point I thought we'd be talking about Kierkegaard on faith and Nietzsche on the death of God. Well, that had to be moved, broken up and moved forward. And I'm not sure we're going to get there even with the schedule where it is. But still asking that if you get a chance, check out the Nietzsche video, for instance, tonight. But here's the new thing. This schools of thought idea, I don't have a better name for it right now. That's just the name of it came to me while I was thinking, how do we take advantage of the pluralism of the schools that's presented to us from day one with Vixie. And that's what I'm calling this. And it's an assignment that is in stages. So you can do different things at different times and work in different configurations. So I thought I would get you started on it today. And I guess you could say that in a way, by mentioning it, is getting you started on it. We'll talk a little bit more about it by the end of class. Tomorrow, put aside a little time to think more about this and talk about it. And as you see this, you're still going on with what I'm calling stage one of this, all the way up through the end of this week. And at that point, basically what I'm asking is that by then you will have chosen one of these schools as sort of your example. It doesn't have to be your favorite school, but so it could be an example, maybe not you're the example of philosophy to you, but an example of what philosophy is like for you, and to try and get inside that school so that instead of just accidentally being, say, attributed to the Stoics, as what Vixie does if you ended up in the land of Stoicism at the end of the game, embrace the idea. If it's, say, Stoicism that you want to learn about, embrace the idea. And so for that, I put some things up, gathered some things that had already been available to you, but hadn't really had recourse to use probably, and put some new things in. And for each of the schools on Blackboard now, there's a collection of materials. There's an encyclopedia article. I don't know what you guys think of that. There are two online encyclopedias of philosophy that I have recourse to. Then both of them are actually quite credible. They're put out by people that teach philosophy classes and such and write philosophy books. So it's not like it's Wikipedia where anybody can put something up without having to necessarily cite it. This is peer reviewed, and so it's legit. It's it's not great literature like Plato. Instead, it's articles about Plato's literary style, say, and things like that. So I put up an article representing each of the schools, or in one or two cases where it wasn't easy to do that because the schools weren't recognized by the folks that compiled the encyclopedia, an exemplary figure. I think in the case of the humanists, I had to do that. I picked Montaigne as our figure. So there's an article on Montaigne. There's also a passage or a selection from Montaigne in that case. In the case of Epicurus, there's a collection of things from Epicurus for you to read, original sources. And I realize in the time we have, it's not feasible to think that everyone is going to be able to seriously read original sources for all, 8 different schools, and make much sense of it. That's why I didn't put them all up on perusal and ask you to start doing that right away. But you probably could get a pretty fair taste of what the philosophers that the school that you choose to investigate really do think if you look at, say, 30 pages of their work. And so I try to keep it about at that level, to find some good works that exemplify to me not just some work by somebody in one of those schools, but critical work that, if possible, bears on our slant on this stuff, which is philosophy as a guide for life, how to live, viewing the world through the lens of the philosophy of a given school or a given figure that represents that school. There's a text for each of them. And there's also just a collection of aphorisms, because that's really kind of how we started thinking about this, was just looking at little witty things that philosophers say that get you to think and give you an insight into what they're doing, that take a very small time maybe to say. So small often that you can memorize them and dwell on them at length if you want, but that when you dwell on, can open up and give you a really good handle on a viewpoint. These aphorisms run the gambit because they're what I could find in the time allowable. I started the collection of this before the semester started, but by this point, I think I have enough to give a fair taste just of little tiny pieces of the views of each of these schools. And those are up there too now. So you can just look and see, well, humanist aphorisms. I think those are almost all by Montaigne, because I couldn't find anything good by Erasmus that I thought was quote worthy, or anything from the Book of the Courtier that was under about 15 pages, and just want something tiny, right? So all of that stuff is there. There's a little package, as it were, for each of these schools. And so you pick a school, you can look at that. You can probably over the course of the week get all the way through one of those things and understand it pretty well on your own. So of course, I'm ready to help anybody that wants to outside of class work on that stuff. And that would be your kind of your assignment for the first stage of this thing, is to try and come up with a character profile for a philosopher that represents the school. Now, of course, some of these philosophers, do a very good job of representing themselves. But what I had in mind was something I think in some ways, a little more imaginative, but also a little less dicey, a little less dangerous. If you wanted to write about, say, what Nietzsche believed, I think that would be a hard task, because Nietzsche, it's hard to say what Nietzsche believes. You can say what Nietzsche has written, and it's voluminous. To try and discern what his thoughts are about what he says that's a serious game that can take a lot of time, and we don't have that much time. So I think the more imaginative, of course, and the one that doesn't get you bogged down in a bunch of historical work, is to say, get a sense for what you think these schools are trying to say, and then just imagine that you are one of the philosophers of this school, or rather create an avatar, if you will, an imaginary character that represents the school, and adopt that role and say, this is what I think. That was my great inspiration. It's like a little bit of role playing. I'm going to role play a representative of one of the schools you choose. And so you need to come up with basically a character profile to do that. And that's what I was talking about with all the material in the schools. So call that stage one. We can talk more about it if you want. I've got all this written out now. You can take a look at it. Stage two, I want to do some peer review. That's probably about as popular a thing to announce as announcing small group work. Professors love to have students work in different configurations, in part because it's exciting for the professor, but also that's just what people who study pedagogy and education and stuff, if they can be believed at all, and I'm not sure they always can be, they're adamant that the worst way to acquit yourself education-wise in a classroom is to be talked at by a professor in the form of a lecture and try and assimilate what the professor says. That's just it's the old-fashioned technique. It's not the original philosophical technique. That one was question and answer, right? But the sort of, I will tell you what you need to write down. You write it down, and then you remember it, and then we test you on it later. That's like the worst kind of pedagogy. Much better for students to take an active part in what they're doing. And one good way to do that is to ask students to look at each other's work and give feedback on that. And so that's what I want to do for the second stage. You've already come up with an idea of a role, as it were, a character that represents a certain school. Share that. And I think a good way to share that, actually, don't worry about this and don't get fixated on this, because I have to see if I can do the technology. If it's difficult technology, I won't ask you to do it this way. I'll find another way. But I was thinking a good way to do this would be to let you put up what you were doing for stage one up on Perusall, so that someone else could make comments on what you were doing. And I was thinking probably the best way to do this, peer reviews can be either anonymous or non-anonymous. And I think an anonymous one might get better reviews. You might be a little more open to saying what you really think about what somebody else's thoughts are, if you didn't have to worry so much about whether or not they were going to know who you were. I'm not suggesting that we'll all sit around and anonymously slag one another, but to have the anonymity factor seems to me might make for more genuine assessment of somebody else's thought. I know it's difficult for me. Sometimes when I have to grade things that really seem like it's going to be difficult and it's going to matter a lot, and I need to really make choices between a job done and a job well done, something I'm not too worried about here. I often have to shield myself from the names of the people involved, because in many cases I know the students well enough to not be able to judge them objectively because I like them. If I like them, I don't want to say necessarily my thoughts in the strongest possible way. I might end up in some cases even saying some things that are largely said out of politeness or kindness, but could be read as if they were endorsements of things that I might not otherwise be willing to praise in somebody's work. So it's sometimes easier to anonymize something like this. I don't know. I'd like to know what you guys think about that, and I can probably ask you about that when you've had a chance to think about it sometime this week. But do you think that's better, or do you think looking at somebody's work and saying, "Hey, I'm Stephen. I'm reading your work, and this is what I think," whether that's more collegial or the anonymity is more comfortable, is a question I guess I want to leave for you guys. I think they both have benefits. But at any rate, I want you to look at somebody else's work and give it the read through and the thoughtful assessment that I would like to give to everybody's work in class, but from your perspective, preferably from the yes.
I think it would be better if we show, like, you have us have our names and not have
Yeah.
animosity, because
Okay.
you can see who's like actually looking at other people's work,
Yeah.
not just
Yeah. Well, I
like the
can see in
anonymous.
my end no matter what. But yeah, but if you but I don't like the idea of not I'm not a big fan of the opposite, whatever the opposite of sharing is, hoarding. I'm not a big fan of hoarding information of any kind. I'm a big sharer, maybe too much so. So my first thought is, yeah, I will, I don't need the anonymity very much because I don't have much of a poker face. I wouldn't be able to hide behind anonymity myself in evaluating something, but then I normally don't need to because I don't normally try to go out of my way to say cruel things to somebody. Of course, that's one of the problems with anonymity, right? Like on the web is that you don't know somebody, so you can slag them if you want, right? I wouldn't want that. But I don't know. What's your point about that? Was maybe not your concern so much, Kennedy. Why do you think it's best if we know who's assessing our work?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. It's just like, oh, okay, thanks. You know who it
Yeah,
is.
more
But Luis
it's more friendly.
Castro in the
Pardon?
chat, he put sharing is caring.
Sure. What sharing is caring? What?
Yeah, in the chat.
I don't guess I don't really understand. I've heard that phrase. Okay, yeah. Well, yeah. My first, it was only as an afterthought that I thought about anonymity. I actually ran it by my wife, who was a middle school teacher, and she was like, "Yeah, that's the way to get them to be honest. Otherwise, people are going to be nice. They're too nice because people are nice. And they don't want to say what they really think. They want to say what they think the other person wants to hear. I don't know. I've never found this actually in the analects, but all my life, all my adult life, I've tried to live by something that I told Confucius once said, which is that if you don't speak ill of people, you don't have to whisper. I guess the same extension of that would be if you're not going to slag somebody, then you don't need anonymity. Say hi. I'm here to help you work on this. I may not agree with your point of view, but I can, if I can't understand it, I'll tell you I don't understand. You can clarify it, and it works better if you know who I am, right? So maybe that's thanks. Unless somebody wants to come back and make an argument to the contrary, then I'll go with my first impulse. What I understand you to be saying, Kennedy, is that um, we don't need to worry about not sharing. You say, look, Kennedy, you say you and Benjamin's written something that he thinks represents a viewpoint that may or may not be his, but one that he can inhabit, at least conceptually. You've done the same. You switch each other's work with each other, and then you help each other by reading through what the other person's done, saying, I understand this part here, I think you could make it stronger. This part here doesn't seem to fit. This part I don't get. Can you clarify? And the back and forth of doing that, I think perusal would provide the way to do that largely. And I certainly wouldn't want you guys to do that just cold either. I'd definitely give you like a checklist or something so you can work through. And yeah, then working as colleagues, perhaps. Assess each other's work and help make it clearer. The objective being, of course, that learning occurs. The learnings already will be occurring, but that you learn more. You learn more about what you're trying to do, and you learn more about what somebody else is trying to do, and you learn more about how to learn about those things. And that would be stage 2. And I don't know where I have that coming in, because I realized at that point we're starting to run out of time. Looks like that's coming in at the end of next week. And then a little stage 3. And this is the part that my wife said, definitely don't tell them about it the way you just mentioned it to me, Stephen, because you'll scare them and you don't mean to do that. I said, I was thinking, oh, well, I know what we can do. We have this study day, but then we have this other day that's the last day of class, and we're supposed to have finals and stuff. We're not really having a final. But I wanted to do something to revivify the whole idea of we're not just learning about philosophy and how it in general can help and abstractly with as a guide for life, but we're actually taking on the approach to the pluralistic philosophy of different schools and trying to seriously, at least temporarily, adopt one of those schools. And I thought, well, then a fine thing to do would be to ask you guys to speak from the viewpoint of your chosen school about ethical issues. Say, all right, you represent, say, the Epicurean school. What would you say about this ethical issue? And I said, well, it'll be like a pop quiz. And that's when my wife said, don't say that. These are like the ugliest words in the pedagogical dictionary. Pop quiz, that makes people think that A, there's going to be some kind of grades, and B, that it's going to be an unpleasant surprise. So what I want is not something unpleasant and not something that's all grade oriented, just simply a chance to really think about, if you were to apply a philosophy of life to a life situation, or a choice of various life situations, little scenarios, what might that be like? And I think the best way to do that would be to let you guys do it on your own, but to encourage you to work together with like-minded people. That way you're not responsible for anybody else's work, but you can benefit from talking to your classmates who will have thought about the same sorts of questions as you. And so I thought that might be a nice way for us to wrap up, is to have a kind of a free-for-all collaborative class period where you for free-form responses to ethical scenarios. Maybe I'm thinking about maybe letting you think about them in advance, and maybe even choose the ones that you think are the most interesting or the easiest to talk about. All of that stuff can be worked out pretty easily along the way. But basically, the idea is that stage 1, you'll be assuming a role as a representative of a class, or creating a role as a representative of a school of philosophy. 2, you'll be sharing that with someone else and reading their presentation and working on that. And the third thing will be now to live it in the case of a hypothetical situation or two. And there, I think the best way to make the most fun of it and to take the most advantage of the fact that we've got a lot of thoughtful people in here is to let you guys just have wide open to collaborate as much as or as little as you like, with no question about whether or not, I mean, if people are working together on something and they share an idea, then of course the work that they produce will probably look a lot the same. That would be a problem if I were going to be worried about things like plagiarism and stuff, but it's no problem at all if it's collaboration. And that's what I would prefer should be our rule anyway. So that would be our stage 3. Will somehow be, and I know I'm making it sound like a terrible thing. And I'm probably making it sound much more confusing than it will actually be in practice. But I see this as kind of just like a fun way to wrap up the semester, a free form, working together to say, what if I really were an existentialist and somebody were to ask me, what should I do in the case of, say, oh, I noticed that my neighbor beats their child. Okay, what would I do? Not what would you do, Kennedy, as Kennedy Calloway, but what would you do if you're an existentialist? And then if you want to work with, say, Andrew, who's decided that he's a He's an Epicurean or maybe a pessimist. Yeah, that would be a nice one. This is a pessimist. He says, well, I don't see any reason not to beat the child. He's going to have to learn that life sucks anyway. Might as well get him started early. That might be an interesting conversation. And so that's kind of what I have in mind for wrapping it all up. And so this is what I've basically done here, besides waste a lot of our time telling you about what I wanted to get out as an announcement for you, but just finally is getting it finally clear in my own mind, is this. We will work towards understanding at the individual level the viewpoints of the chosen one of these schools that you choose. You can choose it based on an affinity. You can choose it based on the fact that that's what Vixie said you were already inclined towards. You can choose it because it's something you don't know anything about, you want to learn about. You can choose it at random. Doesn't matter, as long as once you choose it, you try and think along those lines enough that you can get a picture of what the viewpoint is like. We're looking for viewpoints here. Philosophical viewpoints. And for you to inhabit that viewpoint by the end of it enough that you could speak as if you were a representative of one of these schools to address various issues in the real world. But along the way, to chat back and forth between either members of the same viewpoint, people who share the same viewpoint, or people who don't. And the ability to do both of those things is important, I think. So it's a way of play acting the whole idea of the class, that philosophy really can be a guide to life. But instead of having to put your own life under the microscope, you've assumed a character of sorts, and the scenarios are also hypothetical. And so I think it brings an element of play. I hope it brings an element of distance, so that things that might otherwise be personal and therefore difficult to talk about, you can table and put aside. And for anybody who's got a little bit of the theater bug, I think it might play to that too. So that's my big idea. That's what took me so long over the weekend to try and get together and to get clear, is how that's all broken down in stages. And again, I'm presenting this to you guys not in the fashion that I would have hoped, which would have been a well-rehearsed little video with the slides to go along with it. But as a work in progress. But I can show you real quickly. Let me stop sharing here. The kind of stuff that I have already written up that will make it clearer than perhaps my long exposition just did. It's going to be right here. I'm going to share a document with you guys real quickly, and just want to show it to you right now because I can make it better. I can make it clearer. But so far, something like this. Let me share this with you guys. Now, share screen. Come on. So here we go. Schools of thought, multi-stage assignment. Stage 1, choose a philosophical school to model and develop an imaginary philosophical character profile. And here's some instructions for how to make it happen. Oh, I don't know. Am I sharing? I'm not sharing yet. Sorry. There. Here's some instructions for how to make it happen. And if it has to be any more complicated than this, then I think I'm overcomplicating it. That's a problem I often have. Stage 2, peer evaluation of your character profiles. So you're going to swap, and I'll give you a checklist, as I say, that you can rubric. I think is the language they use in pedagogy that you can use if you want to help you work through while you assess somebody else's work. Finally, stage 3, what I'm calling an ethical pop quiz to be answered from the viewpoint of the school of your choice. Working in little groups, characters will be presented with the choice of hypothetical ethical scenarios for deliberation. Address the scenarios from your character's viewpoint, offering your judgments and justifications. And that's it. That takes the place of this thing, which I'm going to show you, has been sitting, some of you may have seen it, in fact. It's been sitting up on Blackboard for a while, under assignments, but I just removed it at about 12:30 last night when I finally decided this is the way we're going to go. So I can show it to you here, but it's no longer relevant to you guys. this was the big assignment that I thought we would shoot for at the end of the semester. And originally it was going to ask you for 7 days of work from you guys. You're like, what is this, man, insane? Yeah, but I'm getting better, I think, because then I by last week I decided 7 days is ridiculous. To ask you to come up with 7 days worth of activities by yourself that vivify a philosophical viewpoint, that just seemed way too ambitious. That's the kind of thing that might be an end result for a full-length semester, but we've got so little time, and it's so compacted, and so much to try and learn that the more I thought about it, the more I thought this is just unrealistic to think that this could ever be anything other than just a torment for people. And I don't want it to be a torment. I want it to be a fun learning activity. So then I switched it to a 5 days, and then I thought, well, no, we'll make it 3 days, changing the scale, but still leaving entirely up to the students the whole process of constructing the whole thing and figuring out how to apply what they've constructed to themselves, and then to present all that, all of which I think is fun. Sort of like, here you go, here's some glue, here's some macaroni, some tinsel, some paper plates. Now go make yourself a model of the World Trade Center or whatever you want and turn it in Tuesday. I think that sounds kind of fun, but I think it also sounds kind of scary. If I think about it from the student's perspective, some people might gravitate towards that, and other people are going to say, gee whiz, I don't even know where to start. And now I feel frustrated. So I didn't want to do that anymore. So I've just taken that off our agenda, and replaced it not with one thing, but with this thing that has 3 little parts, each one of which is a lot more manageable, I think, and each one of which has a little more structure to it. Though I don't want the structure to bind you. I want the structure there for you, to benefit you. You're always welcome to step away from anything that I present as a structure for you to use. But I wanted to be able to have something for you that you could use if you wanted it, or adapt it for your own needs. But better if I give you something rather than just a blank sheet. Well, I should say that it's been a long learning curve for me. What seems to me to be the most challenging way to interest a student is to do nothing, and to have the students do everything themselves, even developing the questions that you want them to try and answer. That, of course, is often something that I used to try and leave up to the students entirely. And I think for very few number of students that can work fine. Those who are already pursuing a course are self-motivated and know what they want to do, and nothing's going to stop them. But for most students, that's asking them to just put a lot more time and effort into something that may not be what they have time for. So I don't know. I think I've learned something positive over time. And I used to, my general response to students at the end of, as the semester would get near the end, they'd say, what is it that we're supposed to do for you, Dr. Leeds, so that we know that we've learned something in the class? And I said, well, figure it out yourself. Do something. Think about what we've talked about. Think about what we've tried to understand as we've gone forward in our time together, and make something that you're proud of, that represents that. And in a way, that seems to me to be a kind way to structure classes. Like, you be you, and tell me what it is that you've learned, or what you think we're supposed to be learning, in the way that you think is best. However, I do hear from students that is, though intended to be kind of a pedagogical act of kindness, is actually sometimes quite cruel. And I think, I put in mind of something that happens in one of the Dostoevsky's novels, the Grand Inquisitor, and the brothers Karamazov. The setting is the jail, and in jail is this person who turns out to be Jesus, effectively. And the Grand Inquisitor is talking to Jesus and telling him about how he's poorly suited for the times, that the people that he's there to talk to and save just they're not going to get it. And the reason they're not going to get it is that the message that Jesus, according to Dostoevsky, wants to share is that everyone is free, and that there is no sin, there is no blame, there is no sadness or sorrow. Everything is perfect, and the kingdom of heaven is here and now. And that may or may not be what Jesus was there to talk about. That seemed to be what Dostoevsky's vision of it was. But the Grand Inquisitor, I think, is right. He says, people can't handle a message like that. What do you want them to do with that? Say you're completely free, just go on and just continue to be completely free, and you'll be fine. That's a horrifying thing to say to people. They start to wonder, what does it mean? You mean I can do anything I want? Then what should I do? Well, now the responsibility is on you. So, wait a second, you said I was free, but now you've given me an infinite responsibility, the responsibility of infinite freedom. It's not a small thing. Now I need a savior. I need someone to save me. Seems to be the dialectic there. I don't know about the religious aspect of it all. I was hesitating to bring it up, but because it makes such an impact in my own thinking, I think, yeah, there's something to be said for that. By divesting yourself of authority, you put all the authority in somebody else, and that may seem like an act of kindness or an act of solidarity, but in reality, I think it's could just as well be criticized as dereliction of duty and maybe a lack of understanding and therefore of compassion. So I think we'll probably do better if there's room for you to work from a template, as it were, and adjust it to your own needs, rather than me just asking you to do everything on your own and telling you I'll figure out a way to appreciate it and to assess it when you're all done. It's a little easier on me, and I think it's a lot easier on you if I sort of give you some structure in short. So that's what I tried to do, and that's why we're not going to do this anymore. But if you want to do this and you think you have a need to take another philosophy class, this is the kind of thing that we do in the Philosophy as Way of Life classes, where we have more time, where the whole project of the semester is basically to get people experimenting with philosophy, not just thinking about it, but actually doing it. This is the kind of thing that would be a term project there. So if you want to do this, there's a place for you to do it. You can even do it with an Asian accent in the fall if you want, because I'll be doing 2 Philosophy as a Way of Life classes, and something like this will be the term project there. But I just think it's not suitable for where we are, what the time we have, the time, and the fact that though I think we've had some good conversations. It's all been online, and by definitions, almost that means that the majority of the class is usually in a more quiet, passive, receptive mode, and not really active enough that I feel confident that I can say to people, you know what you're doing, go your own way. I think it might be better if I say, here's the way that you could go, and feel free to adapt it, feel free to change it, feel free to ignore it. But if you want to, you can just follow what I've laid out, put in your own contribution to it, and know that it'll be successful. That's the whole thing, the justification and the backstory. And I wish I hadn't spent so much time on this. I really wish I could have gotten this together in such a way that I could have given you a pithy 5-minute video performance, as it were, about what it is that I have in store for you and what fun it's going to be. But the truth is, there's a lot of thinking that goes into this. Not all of it productive, but there's a lot of thinking and it goes into this to get it to the position wherein I can feel actually myself good about asking you to do these things, because I don't want you to do things because I can make you do them at all. I want you to do things because when you do them, you'll find that you're glad you did them and you learned something. And that's a tough one, because I don't know you well enough to know what you need to know. I don't know myself well enough to know what I need to know. I only find out by doing. And so I want to get you guys doing, but I want to get you doing in such a way that you feel comfortable and that you're doing something the right way, the right ways, I should say. Let's pluralize all of it. So that's all this. I'm sorry, I've taken so much time today talking about this. Obviously, I invest a lot of emotion and these things that probably would be best kept out of it. But I should mention that probably if I have a philosophical issue, I have a lot of philosophical complexes, but if there's one philosophical issue that's occupied me consistently for the better part of 30 years, it's the question of authority. I don't believe in authority. I don't think that authority makes much sense. It's at best it's a compromise in a complex world. But the philosophical question of authority was actually the topic of my dissertation, and if 12 years of thinking about that hadn't laid it to rest, the last 25 years of teaching has not helped either. So the long and the short of it is, I'm uncomfortable asking you guys to do things unless I think that I can actually get you to do them in such a way that you enjoy it and that you want to do it. And that's hard it's hard to figure that out. So sorry about the time it took. Sorry about the messiness of it. I hope at least that the spirit of it has come through. The idea here is that this should be fun, that it should be a chance to stretch a little bit, that it should be a chance to play it thinking in a way that maybe hard thinking itself wouldn't allow that kind of freedom. And that's about it, because I believe in play and in freedom. So that's it. That's my story. And I'm going to stick to it unless somebody talks me out of it, and maybe take a minute and see whether there are any questions. I'm sure you have specific questions about specific parts of it, but we've got time to work all that out. And as I say, I'm writing this stuff out and show it to you, share it with you as needed. But if anybody's like, what were you just talking about, Dr. Lisa? I heard words come out of your mouth, but I had no idea what they referred to. But does anybody have any questions at this point about this? Let me just say that the important part is that you don't have to do a big, long, hard assignment. You're going to do 3 easy assignments that add up to replace the big, long, hard assignment. And when I say easy, that doesn't mean trivial. The only challenge, the only limit to the challenge is self-imposed. Whatever you decide works for you will work for you. But I hope that will mean that you'll take advantage of that opportunity to stretch and not just phone it in. So that's the main thing. Does that make sense, guys? And one other question that maybe might be lurking in somebody's mind is, why didn't you have all this figured out before? I don't know. I think I would have had to go through the whole process again had I had it all figured out before to be in keeping with my own ideals about this. And I like to keep it fresh. I mean, I don't want to just phone in what I do either. I want to think about what I do in a philosophy class. I want to, even if it's something as small as crafting an assignment, it can matter. And I want it to be right. I don't want it to be good enough. I want it to be good. So that's why it's taken so long. If you have troubles with it and you want to say, talk to me about trying some other way of quitting yourself so that you're doing something, but maybe this doesn't work for you. I'm always open to that. I mean, anything that you can offer as more true to you as a way of approaching philosophy, I'm more than happy to encourage you to follow that instead. But again, I want you guys to have something that you can understand in theory and just go have fun with and learn from. And so that's what I tried to craft here. I hope it'll work all right for you guys. It's still in process. I'll be working on it, but I should have everything ironed out in the next day or so in such a way that I'll have forms for you to use if you want to, rubrics and checklists and all that stuff. And the due dates will be codified. And here we do need to be a little more careful about the due dates than we've been in the past, perhaps, and I need to be, because if we're asking you to do work that is going to be given to somebody else for them to do work with, if you're behind with that, that slows them down. So it's not really fair to them either. So be aware of those time constraints, and we'll try and work with them without making it too onerous. And I guess that's it. Somebody wants to say something or ask something. Maybe we could, maybe give a minute. sometimes I think the easiest way to achieve the happiest outcome is simply to just dictate and say, this is what you're going to do. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. But I feel that unfortunately you can't do that and still call yourself a philosophy teacher. Philosophy ought to avoid anything. It ought to avoid peremptory commands that can't be rationally justified. If you any judgment is subject to question in philosophy. Any belief, I think even the belief that every belief should be questioned, any belief should be questioned, is a kind of a maxim in philosophy. And so if you just say, there are no questions, this is how it's going to be, I think you're being untrue to the whole spirit of the enterprise. But sometimes it would make things faster. So I contemplate that. Contemplate sometimes just as I don't want to go much further with it. It might be a lot easier to just assume the role of someone else and just say, this is what you need to do, or else. And then at the end say, just kidding. I didn't mean it. You could have done it any other way. But I think for my part at least, I can't call it philosophy if you don't have a right to object to everything I say and everything I think about the shared enterprise we're engaged in. And so if you don't know what it is that's going on behind the scenes, as it were, how can you object? So I have to tell you everything in excruciating detail, or else I'm cheating. That's the way I feel about it. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but if there aren't any more questions, let's look at some beautiful philosophy real quickly in the time we have left. Is that okay? That would be, doesn't get much more beautiful in my mind than, at least in Western philosophy, than Plato. And that's about where we were leaving. We was about ready to get there when we ran out of time the other day. Let me make sure that we nailed that landing, as it were, with Aristotle, as I hoped we had. What is it to have a good life for Aristotle? It's to experience this thing called eudaimonia, which is the Greek word that gets translated as happiness, but happiness is so iffy and mushy. It means flourishing. It means being the person that the best version of you that you're capable of being. That is eudaimonia for you. And how do you do that? Well, you do that by becoming excellent at things, at excellent things, and doing them excellently. And to do something excellently means, in part, to do it the way other people that you think you can admire do things. That is, you imitate excellent people doing excellent things, at least at the start, to get some practice in virtue. But then you have to make it your own. It's not enough to just copy. You have to feel that what you're doing is in some way your exercise. And if what you're doing is you're applying yourself to, say, studying physics, then do it well. And don't do it as if it were simply external rules imposed upon you, but take it passionately, take it seriously, and say, this is my thing right now. I'm doing this, and do it as well as you can. And that means, in many cases, shooting for what Aristotle calls a mean between excess and deficiency. Usually, excellence falls somewhere between too much and too little. Not always, but usually. But then what that mean is will differ for different people at different times in their life, depending on their different projects. But there's probably some things that flow through all of them. For instance, it's hard to be an excellent person if you completely lack integrity. You may be an excellent crook. You may be an excellent burglar. But are you an excellent person? Well, the more you spend your time burgling, I think the less likely you are to be an excellent person, right? Kind of an excellent person if you're excellent at excellent things. And though you can be an excellent burglar, it might be better to be, say, an excellent teacher or an excellent politician or an excellent businessman or something that really helps other people, and do that excellently, especially since we're social creatures in Aristotle's mind. But at the end of the day, nobody's life is going to be flowering exactly the same as anybody else's. There's room to disagree about priorities in Aristotle. There's room to disagree about what virtues matter most. But without virtue, without excellence, your life is inadequate. You may settle for a comfort level that doesn't challenge you and doesn't involve you in the complex world that makes possible all kinds of other virtues that you miss if you were to just sit at home and play video games and smoke your bong, say. You can do the latter, play video games and smoke a bong all day and be content maybe, but you won't truly flower, seems to be Aristotle's claim. It won't be the best that you could be. The best that you could be will be some kind of human activity involving thinking and interacting with other people. And that's part of what we're designed to be as people by nature, and that's who we should become. Otherwise, we fail to live up to our potentialities. I don't know. That's Aristotle in a nutshell, as I understand it. Does that sound about right to you guys? Maybe we didn't get close enough that I can just say that and say, yeah, is that what you guys heard? that's what I was hearing as we were getting there. But then maybe I was filling in the blanks. I wonder, any musicians out there? I would like to talk to somebody someday seriously about this thing that I think is called overtones. When you hear certain notes in music, you sometimes hear the space between them. It's kind of filled up with the resonance. And frequently, it seems to me, when I pay close attention to it, I realize that most of those overtones aren't really there for the person to hear as much as they're constituted by the person listening. They imagine them into place. It's kind of like when you read the newspaper, they say you can take out every third word and you wouldn't even notice it. You're still reading the newspaper because you're filling in all the blanks because it's so conventional. I think in the same way, a lot of what I listen to in music that I find so enjoyable actually isn't in the music. It's suggested by the music and I put it together and it works. And so maybe what I'm doing here is I'm reading what are really just overtones that I'm picking up as if they were part of what Aristotle's getting at. So I'm not sure about that. Whether the picture I just gave you, that's my picture of what Aristotle's doing, right? Your picture may be different. Does that sound at all like a picture of something like Aristotle to you guys? Maybe that's a better way to put it. See, I think Aristotle's trying to tell us something like that we gotta think to succeed, and we should invest in becoming skillful at negotiating a complex world with lots of threats and lots of challenges and lots of enticements, and not giving in where we shouldn't give in, holding ourselves to a high standard, and getting better and better and better at the art of living in a complex world. The better we get at the art of living, the better off we'll be. And part of the art of living is equipping yourself for it so that you don't rest content with just the bare essentials, enough to get by as a plant or an animal, but you take full advantage of your humanity and all the stuff that your culture can provide. And you navigate your way through that, learning as you go. And life seems like it will never become dull that way. It'll always be full of challenges that hopefully you can meet, because largely they involve taking yourself from where you are to where you want to be on a daily basis. And though that may not be the same course for you as it would be for me or anybody else in the class, it's not radically different. If you decide that what you want to do is turn your back on all the wonderful things that you could be doing and do nothing, you'll get your wish perhaps, but you may not want what you wished for. You may find that you've wasted your opportunities to have an excellent life that way. And that at the end of the day, you haven't flowered as much as you just shriveled up. There, that's my recap. That's Aristotle to me on ethics. Thoughts, folks? Is that anything you didn't know already about life? Is that just wrong? Is that just some old guy from the being channeled through some other old guy telling you a bunch of old guy stuff? You buy that there is a human nature that needs to find expression for us to be happy, and that part of that human nature involves stuff like thinking and deciding things and learning skills and stuff. Does that make sense? Because I kind of get the feeling maybe it's me, maybe my default theory is that the easiest thing is doing nothing. Just don't bother me and I'll be happy. But I don't know that that's true at all. The more I think about like the stuff that Aristotle and people like Confucius, who's another one, talk about self-cultivation, the more I think you're not really happy if people just leave you alone. You're that's not happiness. That's not full happiness. That's not because you're not using all the things that are out there to become something better than just your default. You're just left to your own devices. You tend to sort of go for the mediocre, I would think. And you need to be challenged in some ways. You need to be part of a bigger world than just the one that presents itself most easily to you. Got to try new things and stuff like that. It makes sense to me. I don't know. What do you guys think? Yeah. Well, it's good. It's worth considering at any rate. I don't know that we're going to see anybody who too adamantly argues absolutely against it. The Taoists come pretty close. The Taoists seem to me to be closest in my mind to folks who say, you know what, people tend to mess things up. The more they think about things, the more complex and strange they become. Real happiness lies in the simplicity that was given to us by nature. Satisfy the natural urges as easily and as inextravagantly as you can, and then just abide. That's what life is all about. That's my reading of Taoism, at least. That occurs to me that I don't have too much time left. Well, we've got 17 minutes, and I do want to look at Plato, but yeah, I will send. Here's what I'll do. I did something. This is not even anything other than just collecting something that was already in the Vixie game. I don't know if you guys remember when you play the Vixie game that you're getting these messages in a bottle from these various schools, and the schools are all represented at the bottom of the front page by these little symbols. If you click on those symbols, they give you a thumbnail sketch of each school. And so I put all that stuff, let me just share it with you right now. I put all that stuff together on a little document just to have it convenient. This is like an overview, an extremely simplified overview of the positions
Professor.
of the various schools. Yeah.
Emily in the chat, she said that was beautiful.
What was beautiful?
Emily said that was beautiful. I guess your speech. I'm pretty sure that's what she meant.
Oh my. Okay. Well, that's Aristotle then, so we'll give him the credit. I mean, I think it's Aristotle. I really don't know if it's Aristotle. That's my understanding of that's what I want Aristotle to say. How about that? So still, he gets the credit, right? But thanks. That's good. Yeah, boy, don't hear that too often. Usually, yeah, that's nice. Hey, so here, let me. I'm embarrassed now. Let me share the screen again. So yeah, here's what it looks like when you start playing Vixie, right? In these little schools down here, if you click, it won't do anything now because this is just a PDF. But if you clicked on these when you're on the game, you'd get a little profile of each school along with one little extra quotation. You get all these quotations as you play. I wonder how many there really are. I haven't been able to get behind the scenes enough to know what exactly goes on here, but you get a little profile of each of these, and I put them all together. And I'm just going to share that with you guys as a link right now. Let me find it again. It's here, ready to go. I'll put it in the chat, and then we'll go back and look at something maybe truly beautiful, or at least what I think is meant to be kind of beautiful, which is it doesn't contradict what Aristotle says. But it doesn't say the same thing. It says it in sort of a different way. but it's a neat little image that Plato gives that's kind of famous that I wanted to at least wanted to get on the table with you guys. So let's see, schools of thought. Here it is. Nope, that's not it. Sorry, wrong document. Try one more time. I'll have this for you guys. And again, there's nothing here except what I copied straight out of the Vixie archives, as it were. Share. So if you're wondering, like, what are these schools again? Because I don't remember. I remember which one maybe I was assigned to when I played the game the first time. But here is a list of possible schools for you to consider. Chat. I think that's the right thing. Let's see. So it should look, I'll just share screen one more time here. It should look kind of like this. Nothing too fancy. Just and the order in which they give them is weird. I think I just followed their order. They start with the Epicureans and they say, here's a blurb. This is not enough probably for you to say, I know what it is to be an Epicurean now, but it'll get you started if you don't know what any of these schools represent because you haven't encountered them heretofore. My bad, first of all. And second, this will get you started. You'll know whether or not you really even want to spend much time with this. We naturally seek pleasure, try to avoid pain, say Epicureans. The ideal human life is quiet and simple, free from pain and mental anguish. Friendship is an immortal good, with social status, power, and luxury are to be avoided. Live in harmony with nature. Yeah, that sounds like a Taoist there too. Spend your days among dear friends and stay away from politics. Enjoy the health of the body and the tranquility of the mind, and don't fear death. Because remember, when you die, you're not there, and when death is there, you're not. So don't worry about it. And here's a little maxim for Epicureans: we must exercise ourselves in the things which bring happiness. But so there's the schools, right? Epicureans, Stoics, Buddhists, Taoists, pessimists, existentialists, humanists, classical Greeks. I left the Stoics out. They're in here. No, there they are. Okay, those are our options, right? You can add another one if you really want. If you like, I've been through all of this stuff. I'm so beyond all that. I'm in the transhumanist school. I only read Zizek these days or something. Knock yourself out. These are not the only schools. You can add another one if you want. But you could do worse than to pick one of these and try and inhabit this conceptually for a week, which is kind of what you should be doing this week. Okay, so let me stop sharing here and finally get to what I was gonna do. We spend the better part of the class on today. Let's see, go back to my Jamboard. So many switches and stuff. With an online class, it just gets to be ridiculous after a while. Okay, share. And we have now 11 minutes, not very much time to deal with this beautiful thing. Okay, get out of my way, out of my way. That Plato leaves us, that I wanted us to look at. So here we were with Aristotle, right? And again, this stuff, this is what we were talking about the other day. We share a lot with just vegetables and with all the other animals in the world, but we also have some things that humans are particularly good at, making constructing things and like plays and dramas and novels and armies and submarines and nuclear bombs and all kinds of stuff, and that is kind of interesting to be part of that world. Plus, plenty of chances to exercise moral excellence in those worlds. It's just not often done in some quarters of that world, but that's all the more reason why people of excellent character need to be involved in matters, the kind of things that Epicureans say stay away from, right? But the next page is where I wanted to go for today. And I don't think we got even anywhere close to this. Did I even show you this little picture here of this guy with the horses on the chariot? Yeah, I did. Okay. It's at one point in this dialogue called the Phaedrus, Socrates has reason to start talking about what he's going to call the Suke, which is the Greek way of referring to what, actually, I think it's etymologically connected to our word soul. that thing that makes us alive, that makes us who we are. There is that thing in this way of looking at the world. There's not always that thing in every other way of looking at the world. The Buddhists, for instance, no, they're not down with that idea. It's one of the more interesting aspects of Buddhism. It's like, you souls, that's so last, so 2008 or whatever. We don't have those. We don't have those. We don't need those. We get by fine without them. But to many people, it's like, because we're so conditioned to a view that there's something that makes us us that controls our body in some ways, but isn't necessarily reducible to our body. That's an idea that's been afloat for a long, long time, and I think our cultures imbibe that very deeply, in part from examples like Plato, who, as Nietzsche points out, we might just, if we needed a way to understand Plato's significance, Plato is saying the same thing in Nietzsche's mind, that to a large degree that, for instance, Christianity will end up saying later. He says Christianity is Platonism for the masses. It doesn't have all the philosophical complexity. So instead, it's got some miracles and mysteries and stuff. But basically, it's trying to get you moving in the same idea that what matters is not the material stuff as much as that you will be directed towards the higher things that are possible for you to embrace. At any rate, one thing that I think is pretty clear throughout all three of these classical Greeks that make up the exemplars of our school, and probably for a lot larger category than that, is this idea that you can kind of determine who a person is by what they value. And that the more you value certain things, the more you tend to sort of resemble those things in some way, such that to reference where I think we were talking about this with Socrates' parting words in the Apology, where he says, I don't understand you folks. Many of you guys, you Athenians, you should know better. You spend a lot of time worrying about material comfort and wealth. And then those of you who pride yourself on being a little better than that, you spend your time worrying about your reputation and celebrity and stuff like that. And you don't worry about the good or the true. What's wrong with it? You don't know. I'm sure that in theory you all think that the good and the true and stuff like that is what we should care about. But your actions indicate that mostly you care about material stuff, getting more money or having more food or getting nicer clothes or a new phone, or getting that phones, but whatever. Well, that's certainly true of people I know, myself included. We talk some good talk about stuff that matters to us, that's lofty and whatnot. But when it comes down to like how we actually live, I think I'm a prime example of a person who doesn't quite. The words are one thing and the reality is another sometimes. I'm not immune to desires for things just because they're pretty little things. And I'm certainly not immune to concerns about how other people think about me and whether or not they think highly of me, even if they shouldn't, and stuff like that. And so, I'm not committed to the highest ideals that I myself profess. If you look at my life, that's too bad about me. But this becomes this way of looking at divvying things up runs, I think, not just through Greek culture, but through our culture too. But it may finally have been stamped out in the last few decades. I'm not so sure. I mean, we're all in the grip, according to the Dalai Lama, we're all in the grip of a new ideology, a new religion that has replaced all the old ideologies and old religions, and its name is consumerism. I don't know if he's right about that or not. At the end of the day, he says there's only one world religion. It's buying stuff. The buying stuff will make you happy. I don't know. But anyway, so in this picture, I just get some of this stuff out of the way. I guess a couple of quick examples. All the way back to Pythagoras. Pythagoras famously said that life is like the Olympic Games, which is a big deal to the Greeks. Every 4 years, everybody that could went to who got gathered together to watch people compete in athletic contests. He said that there's all kinds of people come to the games. Some people come to sell stuff. Hey, you want to buy some buns to eat while you're watching the contest? He says those are the hoi polloi, the Greek for the masses, the uncultured ones. And then there are the people that are there who've been working on their skills, and they're there to box, or they're there to do the long jump with weights, or they're there to do all the kinds of weird stuff, and some of it just crazy, insane stuff that they would do in the Greek Olympics. Dangerous, crazy stuff. Plus the stuff that we still do, I guess, in the Olympics. This is those people, they're the ones that everybody pays attention to, but they're not really the ones who know what's going on. The ones who know what's going on are the people that come to watch. They're there not to compete and not to, buy and sell, but they're there to enjoy the show. And that enjoying the show is tantamount to thinking for Pythagoras, because just to look on something is to theorezein, to form a theory. So, I don't know if you think about that when you're watching sports on TV, if you ever do this, like watching this. I was watching a soccer match last night, and just thinking, oh, how beautiful it is. I was watching it move back and forth like waves. And so, am I getting the best out of the soccer, or are the guys playing the game getting the best out of it? Or are the guys selling the t-shirts getting the best out of it? And I don't know what the truth is. But Pythagoras' view is I was getting the best of it because I was enjoying it in that way without having to be all caught up in the passions of the play in the way that the players themselves were, and without just missing the whole thing and just worrying about making a buck by selling t-shirts like the people in the booths. I don't know. First off, hierarchies are kind of smell funny to most of us these days. What is this, like classism? Yes, it's classism, right? It's supposed to be, I guess, sort of not like a imposed from it without classism, but like a hierarchy of virtue or something. Those who are into thinking about things are supposed to be sort of above those who do things, and those who do things can be divided up into those who do those things which are respectable, and those who do those things that are a little less respectable, which in the minds of the Greeks, for better or worse, simple commerce and business is like low class, right? How nice for them that they can say, making money is that's beneath some of them. But anyway, yeah, it sounds horrible, doesn't it? Don't have time to really read you what Plato says about this, but suffice to say that this three-piece thing here is us. Your reason, your brains are supposed to be embodied in the guy that's steering the chariot. The chariot is pulled by the white horse and the dark horse. And in case you wondered how far back racism about complexions go in Western culture, at least back to here, because the white horse is the noble horse and the dark horse is the bad horse. The dark horse is is hard to control. It's appetite, it's lust. And when it sees what it wants, it goes for it without anything thought about whether it should or it shouldn't, and without any thought about what it's doing to the whole course of the chariot and the other horse. The white horse is in between. It's a horse, so it still does what horses do. It's an animal, but it's loftier in its way. It's more tame. It's easier to control. And so the whole setup here is that the theoretical, the person that drives the chariot uses the white horse and the dark horse in tandem to advance through life towards the goals. But the dark horse wants to grab the goals and basically jump on it and hump it because it's a beautiful thing to it. And the white horse wants to, out of shame and fear, wants to pull in the opposite direction. Your job is to manage to control those horses by suppressing the dark horse and using the white horse to get you into such a way that you, in the proper way, approach the objects of your desire, so that you don't commit acts of concupiscence and shameful lust, and at the same time that you don't just sort of drift off into nothingness, but that you orbit around the object of the divine in such a way that the beautiful thing, you can contemplate it and take it in in the right way without besmirching it. And that counts as knowledge of the beautiful. Okay. Ooh, that's a lot in a very short period of time. Can't do much with it at this point. Gotta let you guys go. We're done. Much less can I do much with where I wanted to go next. Dividing our goals into the same three categories. That which is just kind of useful, that which is useful but also beneficial in its own way, and that which is purely good for its own sake. If we can find those things, those are the things that we should be driving our chariots towards. Maybe let's talk a little bit about that tomorrow. In the meanwhile, I guess I'll let you guys go, and thank you for bearing with me today. I just wish we had another month. We don't. I'll let you guys go, and I'll see you tomorrow. Write me if you have any questions or concerns about anything, and I'll try and be succinct and clear in my answers. Okay. And otherwise, I'll see you guys tomorrow.
Have a good day, sir.
Bye-bye. You too. Okay. Crystal, did you need to talk to me about something, or are you just on your way out? Hope things are going okay. I'm going to go ahead and sign out, but just shoot me an email if you need me for anything, okay?
Yeah, sorry, Professor. I had walked away from
Oh,
my
no, no
computer.
problem. No problem. Do you need anything right now, or are things going okay?
Yeah, everything's so good. My mom's still like she can't like walk still. She was actually gonna go to work today, but
Oh,
she actually didn't in the end.
she's on the mend, though, I hope. I mean, things are looking positive.
Um, yeah, she's getting like cream and stuff, like trying to like with her leg to like try to help it.
Oh, well, boy, yeah. Sometimes it's tough. I mean, it's a glorious thing to have a body because it lets us go, lets us move around and exist in this world. But it can be a burden too. I'm reaching the point where some days I have more bad days than good. So I sympathize, but well, I hope the upward trend continues. And yeah, just let me know if I can do anything, and otherwise I'll talk to you tomorrow. Okay?
Okay, thank you, Professor.
Sure. Take care. Bye bye.
You too.
How do I get out of here? Oh, here. I don't know.